Every morning, the countdown begins for the markets with meticulous research and analysis designed to help you capitalize on the trading day. Beaming live from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studio.
Good morning. You're with us here on a fresh new edition of Bazaar Morning Call. We are coming to you live from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studios. It's a very, very rainy, wet Mumbai morning, Tuesday morning. And we will get you weather updates as well. Actually, it's been coming down in sheets. Absolutely. Lots to track here in terms of overnight developments and whether there is follow-through after yesterday's great lift that the markets got on the back of all that happened over the prior three trading sessions. I'm Prashant. With me, my colleagues, Surabhi and Nigel. Guys, good morning.
Hi, good morning, folks. It's just grey all across, right? The sky, the sea, the land, it's just a big white slate of grey. So, keep safe out there. Don't venture out unless you really need to for the next couple of hours. The Met has been saying that next, couple of hours, rainfall is expected to be heavy, but we'll get you more updates. There was some waterlogging last night. Let's see. Schools and colleges, of course, shut today in and around Mumbai. That's the city, and we'll get you more. But, guys, it's all about the suit. And it seems this suit is working. I don't know if anything else worked in the diplomacy between all those men out there in the White House, but the suit definitely seems to be working.
Indeed, always an interesting piece, right, coming in from on the global front. But just with regard to the Mumbai rains, I think stay safe, guys, out there. This is not the day to go to Lanabla for a drive. This is not the day to venture out or do those reels. Please, please, stay safe. That's important. You're being given a holiday for a reason. Stay indoors.
What holiday? Schools, huh?
Schools, schools.
All right, let's take it from the top then, right, in terms of what you need to know as we begin this session. So President Trump, the meeting, the eyes were on that meeting, right? President Trump called Russian President Putin after meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky and EU leaders as well. I think that's the key takeaway. And apparently that call happened while, all those guys were still in the White House meeting with him. He sort of called Putin in between meeting with his sort of counterparts from EU and Ukraine, etc. I'll tell you why we know that. Trump said he's actively working to arrange a summit between Putin and Zelensky. So he said, well, he may be there as well, so like a trilateral meeting. Remember, this is significant because so far Zelensky, egged on by Trump, has offered to meet Putin. Putin has refused so far. He's basically offered up as foreign minister and other officials, but he himself in person has refused to meet unless some of his conditions are met. Trump said a direct meeting could provide a reasonable chance of ending the war. So that is, something which, of course, he believes is possible. And the reason we know that, this call to Putin happened is because NATO's Secretary General, Mark Rutte is somebody who's very close to Putin, is sometimes referred to as the Trump whisperer. He confirmed that Putin has agreed in principle to a meeting with Zelensky. We've not heard anything from the Kremlin, from Russia, from Putin, or any of from the Russian side, basically. But the NATO Secretary General said that looks like Putin has agreed in principle for that meeting between Zelensky, Putin, and maybe Trump there as well. So I think this is not the end of the story. This will go on, if you wanted to put probabilities to it, perhaps still a toss of a coin, we'll see. But this is at least moving now in direction which we've not seen for the last 3.5 years that the war has raged on. In terms of price action last night, nothing very much. US equities flat. S&P was almost unchanged. Dollar index was up about 0.3%, 98. Oil, $66.5 per barrel. Markets in the US and actually around the world will also wait for Fed Chair Powell's speech later this week at Jackson Hole. I think that's going to be important. Yesterday, Prime Minister Modi chaired a meeting with ministers here in India, and this comes on the heels of the announcement on GST, the promise on GST, etc., which he made from the Red Fort on the 15th of August. He chaired a meeting with ministers, secretaries, economists to discuss next generation reforms. And the reason this is important is because this is the first meeting that the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs held with the Niti Aayog, with economists and other involved parties. This is the first meeting in about 5 years that has taken place. And this kind of then shows the intent that perhaps what has been a promise as far as GST is one, but maybe there is more coming. At least the government wants to do it and move in that direction in terms of intent. I'll just circle and tie in the levels. The big question is whether there is more left after yesterday's big move. The Nifty yesterday managed to end above the 20-day moving average. It has also retraced 50% of this entire fall from the highs that we've seen. So support for the market comes in at the 20-day moving average, the first one, 24,753, and then the lower end of the gap. That is basically the gap between Thursday's close and yesterday's gap up. The lower end of that gap is 24,673. Resistance comes in, 50% is done. 61.8% is 25,160. For the Nifty Bank, the resistance comes in at the 40-day exponential moving average, 55,938. And then the second resistance is the 50% retracement, which is 56,267. Support is the lower end of that gap area, which is nothing but the high on Thursday. 55,472 is that sort of level on the downside as far as the Nifty Bank is concerned. GIFT Nifty will give you a sense. I was saying this yesterday. I think the bulk of the GST-led move is done unless and until what we hear from the group of ministers in terms of proposals, etc., is really big. So I think more normalized kind of market after that big gap up and the decent 250-odd point higher close that we saw on the Nifty. But what are the F&O cues? Nigel is across on the wall with exactly that. Nigel, over to you.
Well, yesterday was a good trading session. We had a couple of booster shots, and that's why we had a good session. Though you can quibble a little bit that the last hour trading action wasn't very encouraging because there was some profit taking on Nifty as well as on individual stocks. But the reason we ended high yesterday was two big reasons. One is the institutional buy number. So both the institutions, they were on the buy side. That was encouraging. Point number one. Point number two is there was a bout of short covering that did take place in yesterday's trading session. So both the Nifty as well as the Nifty Bank. The Nifty Bank, which has been a relative underperformer, there was a bigger short covering bounce that played out here because that index ended high with a gain of around 450 points or thereabouts. And you had the open interest that was down. And that perfectly ties in with what the FIs did because they covered short. Some short covering is what we saw on index futures. Even on stock futures, there was some covering that we saw and there was some long addition. So in yesterday's trading session, there was institutional buying and there was short covering, which in turn pushed the markets higher. Moving to how are they positioned right now? Well, they're pretty much still very, very net short on the index. So the net short positions continue to remain at close to around 1.7 lakh contracts. In percentage terms, it's at around 9%. So some part, it was just some kind of glimpse of short covering that we saw yesterday. There could be more in store if we get more positive news flow that comes in. Moving to the options data, then the 25,000 call, well, that was very active in yesterday's trading session. The premium at around 80 rupees. At one point of time, it was more than 100 rupees. There was writing that we're seeing at this particular level. On the downside, though, the 24,800 put, 24,700 put, there was writing even at those strikes. So just for the day, we're looking at levels, that you're going to be looking to work with. The 20 DMA, that got crossed on the Nifty in yesterday's trading session. That becomes a bit of a support zone, and that's a support range you're looking at. Going by the options data, going by the technical levels as well. Yesterday, we rejected the 25,050-odd mark, 25,050 to 25,100. So that's the broad range you're looking at. The Nifty Bank, it showed signs that it wants to come back to life yesterday. Unfortunately, it ended off the top. And that's the resistance zone you're working with. The 20 DMA around that 56,000 odd mark, and yesterday's high around that 56,200. Crucial resistance zone for the Nifty Bank. Finally, stocks that we're looking at, we told you in the last 30 minutes itself. PNB Housing Finance, possible stock that comes out of the F&O ban. That's precisely what's happened. You're looking at now who's going to be the new man in charge on PNB Housing Finance. The new CEO announcement is something that you're going to be eyeing. And in terms of valuations, it trades at around 0.95 times price to book. So that's the stock that I'll keep on my radar for today's trading session. Back to you guys.
Okay, all right. So we'll watch out for all of that. By the way, Prashant, you'd know this. I don't know about Nigel, but all the meetings that were happening yesterday and the fact that the conclusion is that they'll continue to meet reminded me of the Jaspal Bhatti episode. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. Meeting ke baad kya hua? Well, we decided ugly meeting ki date. So essentially, that's how the global...
legendary show.
Legendary, yeah. So that's how the global diplomacy theatre is playing out. Very quickly, Asian markets, and yeah, that flash on the screen is really interesting. That's the biggest news across Asia this morning. SoftBank is investing $2 billion in Intel. It's picking up about 2% stake. Markets are a little concerned. SoftBank shares are down 5% on the back of that. It's a big global news development. Overall markets in Asia, range bound. The bias is slightly negative, and the implied open is suggesting that we'll also start quiet, maybe 4-5 points on the lower side. Okay, so with that, let's quickly move on and get to the equity call of the morning. Rhythm Desai of Morgan Stanley says earnings for the broad market were in line with narrow indices. Likely improvement in growth coupled with recent developments provide triggers for indices to make new highs sooner rather than later. They are overweight on a host of stocks including L&T, Adani Ports, JSW Energy, Eternal, Memphis, Coforge, Kotak Mahindra Bank, among others. And they are underweight on the likes of Concor, Tata Elxsi, Tech Mahindra, Federal Bank, L&T Finance, Cipla, Hero Moto and Amara Raja, along with Metropolis. So some stock-specific calls coming in from Morgan Stanley this morning.